morning. It's Simon Clarke, CEO of American Lithium, chatting to Matt to give everyone an update on recent events.
Well, we're going to have a special session today because there's so much to talk about. Okay, let's start. Well, I'm going to save Macusani for a second. You spun out Mucasani at last. I want to talk to you about that one. I do want to talk about your investment in Surge Battery, good company. Of course I do. And I do want to talk about Peru and the fact that they've gone pro-mining, hardcore pro-mining. And I do want to talk about that. But I've got to start with the session you just did in DC. We kind of missed each other because you were busy, with meetings with the great and the good. So what was it about? What did you get out of it? What did you learn that's going to be good for your shareholders?
Yeah, I think Matt, what really came home to me is just, like I mentioned when we discussed beforehand, that there is a complete polarization at the moment between where the capital markets are on the lithium space and the reality of what's happening in the sector, what the strategic investors are doing, what the mining companies are doing, what the automobiles and other end users, and what the politicians are doing. And so there's so much momentum, there's so much desire to see production come on, and where possible, sever the links to some of these overseas countries that control the supply chain. So, highly positive from that perspective, which was great. In terms of specific learnings for me, I think what really came out of it for me, and certainly the panel I was on was scaling lithium. And it was very interesting to me because maybe I'm a little slow, but I think the huge advantage that we have with our assets, if you look at the clay stones and Falciani, which will produce a battery grade product, there's so much of the new assets that are being grabbed and put together in North America are hard rocks, where you have to concentrate them. And then you have to build a road, ship them out, and really the only place they can go for the next several years is China. And so, we've got this push to get domestic production, but at the end of the day, the refining and the upgrading piece is even further behind. So I think when you look at a clay stone that can produce a high purity lithium product that doesn't have to go for additional refining and upgrading overseas or wherever, that's a huge advantage that I think we're going to start to get in the interim. And it's interesting, I was on a panel with Piedmont, which is integrated. So they've figured that out. They're putting in their own processing. And then Standard, Robert Mintak. So I would say they're the most advanced of the DLE technologies, and their asset lends itself to the fact that they will be in near-term production. Like a lot of other primes in North America are a good ways out. But so you're looking at three different companies, but all of them have the ability to produce a high purity product in the short term, which is what is needed, rather than a lot of this whole debate about China and how you break that bond. And how are you going to do it if you're going to have to send them product, concentrate, for the next, certainly short to medium term until the upgrading and refining catches up. So I think that's a huge advantage of our products, of our projects, which I think is becoming more and more recognized.
But here's the thing, Simon, with that, and I've heard some reports from the conference last week in DC, is the politicians have kind of set the tone. They've said, right, okay, for automobile industry, it's electric. We are going to incentivize you and industry and the ecosystem around that one extremely well. The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has significantly helped. There's somewhere $137 billion worth of investments into EVs and batteries. So it's happening. But miners, right, the guys who have to supply the materials which goes into these batteries, they're not getting the same support. And there seems to be this disconnect, I think. So I'm intrigued as to what you heard from the politicians. I know Joe Manchin was there, spoke extremely well, but there were other senators there as well. What is their understanding of what they're going to need to do for the mining component of this electric vehicle revolution that they have started?
Well, I think, Matt, and again, we touched on it off the top. While the capital markets catches up and banks get to the point where they're comfortable to find, to finance the building of lithium mines, the U.S. government is setting up. I mean, you talk about IRA. That's obviously the incentives, the tax incentives for domestic supply, also on the EV purchasing side, which is all great. But the DOE is actually handing out real money to miners now to help them build mines. The DOD is starting to do similar. And, I think we'll see more of that. I think the one piece where they have to look at is it's fine. Really, let's focus on companies that have bankable feasibility onwards to building a mine. What about the explorers, the earlier stage developers? How do they get some help? Because, while the capital markets are not fully versed yet on the lithium side or making the investments that, quite frankly, they should be, if you look at what's happening on the other side of the coin, how are they going to get financed? And I think that's a piece that, they're going to have to help some of these companies at an earlier stage. We've been fortunate, as you know, we've been well capitalized. We've got a strong balance sheet, so we haven't had those struggles. And our timing in the market has been good. But you look at a market like today, where yes, everyone's gone on the S&Ps up, but really it's only 5 companies that are up. And if you're a young mining company trying to get funded, it's not easy, even if you're in the sexy lithium space. So I think we need to see more on that. I think it's going to come. I mean, they're very aware. There's definitely moves to widen the IRA. I hate saying the IRA for obvious reasons. They all do, but if IRA and bring in other countries as well, because even Manson recognizes, and I don't mean that in a negative way to him, but he's big focus on U.S. manufacturing. But he knows that we need the expertise of the Aussies, the Koreans, the Japanese. These are deposits of South America. It's all got to come in if we're going to come anywhere close to meeting these timelines. And I think there's a more and more realization of that.
Right, so that's the politicians, right? You sense what you're saying is they understand the moving parts, and mining will hopefully be a beneficiary of that, and certainly in terms of not just credits but actual cold hard cash. Because here's something that I heard, and I won't say where from, but one of the guys I was speaking to a head of a very large US automotive manufacturer. Not too many of those. So the number quoted by that CEO about how much lithium they would need by 2030, how much copper they need by 2030, seems to be very disconnected from the reality of us being able to produce that amount. It was a number significantly higher than the current world production for lithium. It was significantly higher, when it came to nickel, significantly higher than the current nickel production. That's just one automotive company. And then when he spoke to, I think, 3 other automotive companies, they were coming out with, equally kind of slightly hard to believe numbers. And I'm trying to work out, is that just face saving? Is that them thinking, oh, the sector will sort itself out? Or is there this realization, because if you look at the likes of GM and Ford, et cetera, moving sort of upstream and buying into mining companies, do you think we're going to see a lot more of that coming down the line? And do you think it's a case of some of these automotive companies have no idea of the problem which is coming down the line real quick?
I as you know, when I was with Jaguar, Bryce and I used to go to Benchmark and other things, and we met with GM and Ford and some of the others in those days. And I would say they weren't really aware of it, and that's only a few years ago. I mean, they were aware of it, but they weren't yet necessarily believing it. I think what you're seeing today just demonstrates absolutely that, that one of the senior guys from GM was at the Benchmark event in LA last November, and he said, "We've bet the farm. We can't go back." I also spoke to one of his colleagues a few months later, just after they invested in Thacker Pass, and I said, so, 40,000 tons of lithium carbonate, maybe going to 80 off or whatever, you guys done? And he laughed. He said, listen, we need hundreds of thousands of tons. So these guys know it. To think that you would see automakers investing in mining operations like they started to do a few years ago would be unheard of. To think that you'd see the Department of Energy writing a $700 million check into Ioneer even before they've got final mine permits, let alone to fund a mine in itself, but then one without permits. I think you've seen how far it's come. It's going to snowball from here because they don't have a choice. They've bet the farm on it. Are you going to rely on the Chinese? Are you going to rely on your own government to get policies in place as quickly as you need, or are you going to take matters into your own hand and secure your supply chain? And that's what they're doing.
Well, look, I think the mining sector needs to thank some of the politicians, some of the senators for getting involved, not just in terms of the energy with uranium, but also EV conversations as well. But at the same time, there's more to do, because I think you put the nail on the head a second ago there, because the permitting and licensing process has not been simplified. And we're about to talk about it with regards to Peru in a second, but where they have done it and they've gone hard. But did you hear anything which leads you to believe that the US government understands that mining's got to be made easier in terms of the paperwork, in terms of the admin, in terms of all of those things which currently stretch these projects out into decades before they can get into production?
Absolutely. I heard a lot of that. I mean, obviously, the proof is always in the pudding. But there's been lots of debate recently in Congress and amongst the politicians. And I think with guys like Manchin involved in the process, and he's definitely inserted himself into it. In Nevada, where we are, there's a couple of senators who are very, very active as well. So there's a much bigger debate. The Democrats always have to balance that lobby between, the anti-mining environmental brigade, which are not anyone's choices, and the reality that if you want to get to net zero, you have to mine. So there's that balance. And I think they're trying to tread that path, but I think more and more we're starting to hear that they acknowledge that this can't go on. They've got to streamline permitting. I mean, you look at TLC, we've been pretty quick, but we've been over 6 years already. We're going to pilot off, with a partner, one of the big labs likely. So we won't have to permit that. We'll be through PFS by mid next year. We're still looking at a 2-year permitting process at this point to permit a mine, even though we don't have any water table or EPA issues at TLC. So, then you're into construction, and then you're with a following wind, maybe 18 months, probably more like 2 months to have it built. So, that pushes you out towards 2028. And that is probably as fast as you could do it. I commend our team for what they've done. But if you do things in parallel, if you get rid of some of these archaic 100-year rules, it doesn't mean you're giving up on the environment. I mean, look at the Aussies. I mean, they're hugely focused on the environment, but their permitting process is so much better. You look at what Quebec has been trying to do at streetlight things. So you can do it, and you also have to throw more money at it, because the BLM, they're generally good people, but they're very, very short-staffed and overstretched, like a lot of government bodies. So there just needs to be some focus on it, and I really do believe it's coming back. So I think you will see. I think you'll see some moves on that front. That's certainly the sense I got.
Yeah, I think again, coming back to sort of Manchin, I think he was talking about reform on the permitting side of things, and let's hope that does come, because for mining, time is money. And perhaps it doesn't need to be quite as complicated, but doesn't mean a reduction of standards either. Look, I think I'm going to save the best to last, which is Macusani. Okay, let's just talk about a little thing that you did recently. You invested into Surge. Can you tell us why you've this Surge battery metals, why you've done that? What's it going to do for your shareholders?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, Matt, we obviously have been involved in clay stones for over 6 years. I think we have a really good understanding of clay stone mineralization. how the deposits run, if you like, and the issues with it. That every style of mineralization has its own issues, and so we look at what's going on in the sector and the industry. So we look at the other clay stones. I mean, there's a bunch of players that claim they have huge swathes of clay stones, and undoubtedly they do, but we don't think the grades are near where they would need to be commercial. Now that might come with DLE and other technology down the road, but we're always looking on the lookout for other clay stone projects because we understand a lot. We believe, like I said, that the clay stones are going to be one of those styles of mineralization that can come on relatively quickly with a high purity product, so you don't have to upgrade or refine offshore, and can be a really near-term, driver to try and help this deficit that we've been talking about. So, we've been watching Surge for a while, and it's clear. I think I'm not sure what the company was about in the past, but I think they found these assets, and we started to watch the assaying they were doing, and then they did a really interesting drilling. And so they have grades that are certainly at the top end on the claystone spectrum. Yes, from a small drill program, but and where we started to get some more confidence was when Ian Scarr, who was the COO of American Lithium, got involved. Graham Harris, a couple of the other guys got involved. And he obviously knew those guys from founding Millennial. And, Ian's a good friend of this office. And, he's actually on the board of one of the other companies here. And so, he was going on about it. We've taken a lot more of a closer look at the data, liked what we see. And we felt, it's part of what we've learned. It's strategically to get an early stake in it. And if this thing evolves, like we think it could, then, that could obviously lead to something bigger or something greater. And, to do that, get a seat at the table, get board representation, see how it evolves. I think we can also really help them short circuit some of their thinking in terms of the mineralization and met side. And so I think hopefully it's symbiotic, but I think, for not a huge investment to get a decent sized starting stake, the ability to leverage that further through warrants and get someone on the board, we think it's a good thing.
And so that's 9.9%. How much? What did you pay for that? And what actually? And how much money have they got to do what? And are you going to help them, or maybe offer to help?
Yeah. So we've put in 5.3 million. I think that gets us just under 10%. They're raising, I think they're just adding to that without trying to do a much bigger raise, but just adding around it. That helps them raise a total of 7.1. I think they've got a couple of million, maybe 3 million in the bank. So they've probably got 10 million treasury. They're early stage. They have another phase of drilling coming up. As I say, they had an initial 8 holes. They'll do a bunch more around that. Ted O'Connor, who's our EVP, and as discovered Falciani with Lawrence, but also helped us unlock TLC, is going on the board as our representative. And, he is a great geologist, and he and Ian Scarr, who's another geologist on the lithium side, I think have a lot more lithium experience between them than most years. So we'll see where it goes, but we're pretty excited about the potential of the project.
Okay, it feels like it's a symbiotic relationship there. And also, it's kind of interesting. I like it when kind of companies kind of like step outside of the routine, as it were, and keep looking for opportunities. And this is one which is, I guess, an area that you're comfortable with as well. Let's move on to the next bit, which is Peru. I kind of gave a sneak preview of the bit that I'm excited about here, which is when governments get out of their own way. So tell us about what's happening in Peru with regards to mining law and I guess the politicians' view of mining these days.
Yeah, well, I think, Matt, your distribution list and the guys that follow have been through the pain with you and me of the last dysfunctional government in Peru. And again, we have to be apolitical and deal with what we've got. But it's very, very clear the dysfunction that government brought to the mining process. If you're a producer, Peru has a great royalty regime. They've got very fair fiscal regime, so you're doing very well. But anyone who needed development permits was pretty stuck because the ministries were full of people who didn't really understand what they were doing. And really, the government didn't understand. They were trying to cling to power. They were trying to leverage every opportunity they could. So, I think when the government changed in December, everyone thought, what's going to happen now? You end up with Dina Boate, who is a left-leaning president still. But people fail to recognize about Peru, it is historically a center-right country. The Congress is nearly always center-right. It just has a presidential voting process that can, because you have so many parties, if they don't get together on the center-right, you can end up with a president who's not governed, who doesn't really, it would be like, as I've said in the past, you and me, becoming president and getting our mates from school to outrun it. And anyway, no one knew what was going to happen. And then you had the unrest, which was really sponsored by the Cubans and Mexican and Bolivian interference in Peru, and getting the disenfranchised groups to march on Lima. Anyway, that's obviously history, and that's been dealt with. But I think what emerged around the time of PDAC was a real intent to put together a government cross-party lines. So you've got a lot of center-right, you've got a lot of center-left, predominantly working together to move Brazil forward. And they really decided they were going to focus on the economy. Huge part of the Peruvian economy is mining. That was the message that came out of PDAC. And, it's nice to actually see that translated now. Not only did we get our drill permit, first drill permit in around Falciani for 2 years, you saw Tech get their permits, you've seen Toro Mocha get their permits, you've seen Yanacocha Sulfide get permits. Things are starting to move, and the government is now saying very much that, it's back to normal in the mining sector. They've gone on record in recent weeks that they want to see lithium developed as an industrial metal in particular. They want to see copper up 20% this year. I mean, as you probably saw, they fell to number 3 in the world tables on that, which didn't go down well. And so they've decided the economy is the way to go. And within that, earlier, actually last week now, you had the mining minister coming up saying they're going to streamline environment, I think from 18 months to 3 months, with a goal of getting mines permitted within 6 months, which is huge. So, again, you look...
It's huge, but okay, if I'm looking in with my ESG hat on or with my environmental hat on, does that mean all of a sudden we're gonna forget standards?
No, and don't forget in Peru, everything starts at the community level. So, the way the communities are, we're, I'm not going to say lucky, I take my hat off to Plateau and Lawrence and Ted and my guys, but, to have communities that have been to Lima and told the government to get figure out their ass effectively, excuse my French, get on with things is very telling. And the guys, after the troubles, the first time we were able to get, gringos essentially up to site was a few weeks ago. We had Stantec, who's doing the resource expansion. Lawrence was up there. We had a couple of board members. Ted was there, and one of the guys at the uranium side. So we got them all up to site. They get to Isavir, which is the main community where the camp is. And there's all these people out with banners, and they're thinking, oh man, is this a protest? They get there and they're greeted like heroes. The banners are all, welcome back, let's get going. All the school children are out of school, the doctors, because we pay for the doctors and nurses up there and a lot of the school teachers. And so they were greeted like heroes. And so I think that's just evidence of the communities are where it's at. You're not going to get those support up there if you don't have good environmental practices. Again, we're very blessed up there that we have high rainfall, we have hydropower. We're literally 3 miles off the the Two Oceans Highway linking Peru and Brazil. So the infrastructure is good. We don't take the fact that unlike the brines, which use an inordinate amount of water in the deserts, we're in a high rainfall area, but we still look to minimize, water usage, that kind of stuff. So, and then you still have to go through your environmental audit. So, it doesn't mean because you have 6 months to build a mine, we're going to run the EIA piece. For an EIA, you have to monitor the water over a 12-month period. So, but we started that. Our guys were smart enough to say, last year when we weren't getting drilling, okay, what can we do? So we started the EIA and we done that this fall. So we're ahead of the game there. And then, you get it through PFS late this year. Okay, we then have the environmental data, 6 months to permit a mine. Assuming funding's available, you could be in construction of Valchani late next year. Let's call it early 25, and then into producing by late 26, which puts you a couple of years ahead of where TLC is at. Because of this easier, I don't want to say easier is the wrong word, but more efficient and streamlined permitting process. Now again, Matt, seeing is, talk is cheap and seeing is believing. But all I'm saying is the fact that all these permits are starting to come out, the fact that you're starting to see them move on a lot of initiatives now on the mining side, I think is validation that they're not just talking the game.
What I'm hearing, because like you say, for the last 2 years, there's been a case of, oh my goodness, Peru, can you do business in Peru?
Yeah.
Peru, best avoided. You've got a government intent on making it easier to mine and for foreign direct investment to mine in Peru, it seems from what you're saying. Okay, well, let's monitor that situation. That obviously sounds good news. If they're reducing the permitting process into the time from 18 months down to 3 months, that's good news. If they're not, bypassing standards and the expectations of the companies continue to behave appropriately, that's all good news. It's especially,
I think. Sorry to interrupt. You have to remember as well international guidelines on ESG now. And like what we have to do with the SEC, I mean, they're going to publish their guidelines very soon. Even if you felt that the things were too short-circuited in Peru, we have to deal with things like carbon, water, other emissions now through that anyway. And you're not going to get the investment you need if you don't. So it's a critical point to remember. Yes, there's the government side, and I don't think Peru's going to short-circuit the environmental side in any way, shape, or form. They're just being way more efficient with it, like Australia does today. And then we have all the other bodies that we have to adhere to as well.
Okay, well, look, I was about to say it's good news for dog shampoo. No, a Macusani, not dog shampoo. It's good news for Mucasani because it makes life a lot easier. Now, this is the bit I wanted to get to. Okay, this is the dessert, the things I look forward to. You've done the spin out. We've been talking about it for a while. You found a vehicle, and Macusani Uranium has been born. So tell us about the deal structure and then what next.
Yeah, so we are effectively, and it's been structured for tax purposes. So, we attributed a valuation of 36 million on the uranium assets, which is definitely a very favorable valuation. If you're an American shareholder, you don't really mind too much about that because as long as you get your prorated entitlement, the valuation is somewhat secondary. Obviously, the part of the structuring is to avoid tax issues in Peru or Canada, and I shouldn't say, nothing nefarious there. It's just structured to make sure we don't end up triggering any capital gains or anything like that. But at the same time, in the current markets in the world and with the discount that we've seen on Peru, it's certainly a justifiable number that's been validated by, KPMG with a valuation of fairness report. But we do think that the net asset value of 600 million from the last PA is probably the target that we want to close the gap to. And it clearly wasn't going to happen within a lithium developer, Matt. you have a project that is number 3 behind the other 2, not because it's not a great project, but again, we're a lithium developer. We didn't want to necessarily sell it, at current valuations, which are getting higher, but we just think the ability to unlock value. The thing I think a lot of people don't recognize about Macusani is is how you can accelerate this project. We now have a flow sheet that's baked from ANSTO. So we're not going to think, if you think of the structure, so we announced this definitive agreement, we announced a financing at the same time. That's great. We now have to put circulars together and go and get the shareholder votes, and then it will close probably late September kind of time frame. But we're not going to slow down in the interim. We're going to start the piloting. It'll be done at ANSTO. What we're doing right now is we're just getting some more upgraded material from Macusani to send for pilot purposes. We're expecting the permit now for additional drilling, and we have, one thing we've been able to do when we weren't drilling is identify a bunch more targets. So we have over 47 drill targets to expand and infill the existing resource. That's going to start to happen in the second half as well. We will update the resource at Macusani, probably Q1 next year, update the old PA Q2. And that's really the key piece to then enable us to finalize PFS by Q3 of next year. And then, again, if we get this restricted permitting process, we'll run the EIA in parallel with all that other work. And then, even if you say a year to permit the mine, that would have us at FID, mid to late 2025. If you remember on the Macusani side, it's a simple build. It's a modular. We're going to tank leach. So we think the economics from the OPA actually probably get stronger, including the CapEx, because it's much more of a modular design. You can definitely see the potential for production in late 26 from Macusani as well on the uranium side. So we're really excited about it. The structure, as well. So the valuation 36 million. That means American Lithium shareholders are going to see 80 million shares of the new vehicle get distributed, prorated. We're not keeping any back at the corporate level or keep any royalties. And then, the new money will come in a little bit higher valuation at 50 cents a share with a half warrant at $1.25, which, with the milestones and the valuation, we think the potential for this to trade up is significant. And then, from a team perspective, it'll be the same operating team. I mean, as it has been all along. We've talked about communities, community relationships, and this team built this district over 20 years, as you know, and it's critical to have that ongoing. There'll be members of management in common. Ted will be the president. Alex is the CEO. Lawrence and I will be on the board, but there will also be an independent board as well. So that's the vision, Matt, a vehicle that can really drive this project ahead quickly and efficiently. And I think it's an advanced stage asset. Again, if it wasn't for COVID and dysfunction, it would probably be in production.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. And also timing's fascinating because I think uranium hit $59 before settling back down at 57 this week. So it's kind of clear. Again, I don't know if you were having those sorts of conversations in DC with regards to the energy side of things as well. We had USR, we had Macusani Uranium as our winner of the week on this week's Energy Show.
Oh, nice!
For all the reasons. Yep. Well, I think well deserved. Well deserved. So yeah, we shall again. Let's see how that kind of plays out over the next few weeks and months. But I think your timing is impeccable, Simon. Appreciate your time today and sharing all of that. There's a lot going on, lot to be looking at. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it. Cheers, mate.